Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today I thought we would talk about the Tornado, specifically the IDS ASSTA, which is in the German tech tree. During this event I decided that I was going to play some of those vehicles that got changed a lot in BR, and also the vehicles around them. So the Tornado is one of them. I played the A7D as well, tough times, and also the over-BR'd, and going to play a few others as well. The Tornado IDS was definitely not the roughest experience I've had, but it wasn't up there with any of the best either. This vehicle is in a really rough place just because of what it has access to in terms of weaponry and in terms of what you can do on the ground. So first of all, the Tornado IDS is at 11.7 in air realistic. Now you may be asking, why is that? Because the other Tornadoes in the German tech tree are at 11.3, and I was asking myself exactly the same question. The only reason it's at 11.7 is because it has access to guided ordnance in the form of GBU-16s and GBU-24s, which you don't use in air because it is inefficient to use them compared to the standard bombs. So, I have no idea why this thing is a higher BR than the other two, because it has guided munitions, which you don't use. This thing should easily be 11.3 without even thinking. Everything else on the vehicle is basically the same. You don't really get any additional factors on this that are useful in air realistic. And this is kind of a trend that I've seen with a few of these vehicles now, where basically what's ended up happening is they're getting put at higher BRs because they have access to weaponry that you can't really use in air realistic in the current meta. So instead, with the Tornado IDS, you are basically an 11.3 Tornado which has to play at 11.7, which means you see more full teams of F-14s, you see more F-4Ss, and you see more of the Predators that can annihilate you. Now, the way that I was able to grind this thing out was loaded it up with bombs, because that's its main secondary weapon, and also the Mark 83 bombs were at rank 1, so it was quite easy to kind of grind them out. So I ended up bringing 12 bombs overall. Now, it's kind of weird when it comes to the bomb loads. You can take 12 and then 5 bombs will destroy a base, so you can get 2 bases. And also you can have 2 extra bombs, which you can use on other things. Now, a lot of the time you'll get to the bases first, which isn't an issue, but at the same time, if you are up against specific enemies, such as the Americans, you are really going to struggle to get to the bases without being hit. So what you have to do is you have to take a 45-degree angle off the airfield. So when you take off, so go off the map to get out of the radars of stuff like the F-14s, because you have no way of countering them. And then turning into the bases later on. Now, you'll get a feel for it depending on which map that you're actually playing, and then eventually you'll get it right, but most of the time you'll just be able to work it out as you go. Now, this vehicle has a ton of chaff, which is really nice. They added 680 chaff to it. You get that stock, which is good, and also you get the large caliber countermeasures. You get 56 of them stock as well. There's not really much point in getting the Flares chaff pod, or the Flares chaff modification, sorry, because you're going to run those large countermeasures at 56 flares because you have so much chaff. Chaff is not that useful at this BR, unfortunately. There's a lot of radars that counter it, especially the vehicles that people use, so that doesn't really work too well. The vehicle also has 2 AIM-9Ls, which is actually quite nice. It would be nice if it was more, but 2 AIM-9Ls gives you opportunities to be able to try and get people off your path when you are going to bases, and also once you've hit bases, you can then get into the dogfight and be able to use the missiles and then the guns and then go back to base. So this is pretty much the standard game that I had in the Tornado IDS, okay? So, take off, take full fuel. Don't take fuel tanks, external fuel tanks. Take full fuel, alright? Because this thing, the engines on this burn through fuel at a ridiculous rate. The good old turbo unions. So, take full fuel, go to the side of the map, usually the left or the right, depending on which the map was and where the enemy climbs. Then, once you're at about a 50 or 60 degree angle from the bases, head to the bases. If the bases aren't touched by your team, hit the bases. Destroy 2 of them, and then after that point, what you need to do is you need to use your 2 single bombs on individual ground targets. If your team has hit the bases, then what you do is you go after the ground targets which are around. There is actually quite a lot of them now which are soft targets which they brought in and generally feel pretty nice. The only ones you got to be careful of is the grads, the BM21s that they've added in, because they seem to be invincible to bombs at the moment. So you'll just waste your bombs. So after you've done that, you turn towards the mess that is the center of the map, because at that point everybody will have engaged, and then you try and help teammates with your AIM-9Ls to get enemies off of them, and then use your 27mm to hit them while you go through them, and then after you're through them, you sit on the afterburners, get back to the airfield, and that's what you do. So you do a basic loop, and generally that will work the best for this vehicle, and how you'll be able to grind it out and have a bit of fun. Now, grinding wise, the vehicle was a bit easier than others because it has a lot of speed, and it also has a lot of acceleration. So because of its variable swept wing design, what I was able to do against a lot of enemies, if it was a one-on-one scenario for example, is I could kick the variable sweep wings out, go for a turn, and force the other person to turn. They would have to slow down a lot, and then what I would do is I'd kick it back with the wings back, and then put on full afterburners and get out of there. This thing's acceleration is insane compared to a lot of other vehicles that it faces. Also, in the kind of speeds, around 500 to 700 kilometers an hour, it's really good at turning, and that means that a lot of people, if they engage you in a dogfight, you can do a lot. But understand, this is for a one-on-one scenario where there's nobody else around, and you're not going to get hit by any missiles or anything. There was a few times where I ended up having dogfights with stuff like MiG-23s, for example, F-14s, and came out on top pretty handedly, and actually had a really good time. The gun as well has the gun tracking. I don't know what you class it as, but if you lock onto the enemy with the radar, it will tell you where to shoot. Of course, it's the 27mm Mausers, so they have the same issue that we talked about before with the Alpha Jet, but there is two of them, so you don't have to worry too much about those PT shells. They definitely hit decently well, and also they were good for ground pounding too. The radar in the front is pretty useless. I turn it off most of the time, so therefore I don't open up on people's RWRs, but I will say the RWR on the Tornado itself is pretty good. Like, there's nothing to really be sad about in that way. So yeah, is this vehicle good? No, of course it isn't. It's a bomb truck at the end of the day. And when you have a look at all of the vehicles that you face around it, which have so many more options compared to what you can bring along, it makes it kind of sad. And I wish, and I hope in the future, that this vehicle gets lowered in BR. There is absolutely no reason this thing's at 11.7 compared to its compatriots, which are at 11.3. It is exactly the same as them. It has exactly the same playstyle. It just gets worse matchmaking because it's a tech tree vehicle and because it gets guided munitions that it can't use. The A7D is in exactly the same boat as it, as many others are too. And it is an absolute travesty that it's 11.7 and the F-14A is 12.3. So you just face full teams of them, and you're going to face full teams of the event vehicle once it comes in. It's going to be an absolute massacre for this vehicle. Now, my stats in it, surprisingly, weren't terrible, but the only reason for that is because of doing that over and over and over again. 55 battles to spade it, 56 air kills, so we're averaging about 1 kill a battle, 31 deaths, 198 ground kills. 62% win rate, though, because hitting those ground targets at the start of the game really does put your team in a positive place. But still, the actual impact we're having on the battle, when I look at a bunch of other vehicles at 11.3, I would much rather play them to have a much, much higher impact on the battle. And that is the problem with this vehicle. It does not have a huge impact. The only little impact it can have is in the ground pounding capabilities, and that can be done by a lot of vehicles if they decide to do it. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.